Darkness descends, deep in the Carpathian Mountains, where fog clung to the trees like ghostly wisps and the wind carried whispered secrets. An ancient castle stood hidden from prying eyes. This was the lair of the vampire clan, a place untouched by time. Within its crumbling stone walls and shadowed halls, a council gathered, led by their lord, Count Vargas. Count Vargas was not just any vampire. For centuries, he had ruled with a cold, cunning intellect, feeding in the shadows, hunting under the cover of night. But he was tired of living in hiding, of being feared as a mere myth. Vargas dreamed of a world where vampires would not only exist alongside humans but dominate them. He was determined to transform his kind from shadows into rulers. One icy night, as his clan assembled, Count Vargas's voice, smooth yet sharp as a dagger, filled the air. "My children of the night," he began, his red eyes gleaming. "We have lived in secrecy for far too long. Humanity fears us, but they do not truly know our power. We shall rise, and they will bow before us, not out of fear, but out of loyalty." The vampires around him stirred, a murmur of approval weaving through the room like an ominous chant. Vargas continued, explaining his elaborate plan to infiltrate and subjugate the human world from within, like poison spreading silently through veins. No longer would they skulk in dark alleys or feast in hidden corners. No, they would walk among humans, unnoticed, until it was too late. The infiltration begins. The following week, Vargas sent out his most trusted lieutenants into the human world to begin their work. Among them was Lucian, his oldest and most powerful confidant, a vampire whose charm and good looks made him nearly irresistible. Lucian entered a small town on the outskirts of the capital, blending seamlessly into society as a businessman interested in the local economy. Using his charisma and persuasion, Lucian quickly befriended the town's mayor and key leaders. He organized philanthropic events, blood drives, and wellness programs that would benefit the community, or so they thought. Little did the townsfolk know, the blood collected was sent directly to Vargas's castle, nourishing the clan without them having to hunt. And while the blood was taken, for the sick and needy, its true purpose was far darker. Lucian's charisma allowed him to mold the town's leaders to his will, and soon he was suggesting policies that limited travel, for safety reasons, and restricted visitors from entering the town. It wasn't long before the townspeople began to feel a sense of isolation and paranoia. The dark web of control. Simultaneously, Elena, another one of Vargas's lieutenants, infiltrated the media. Elena was beautiful, with a hypnotic gaze that made it easy for her to sway those around her. She became a journalist in a popular newspaper, using her platform to influence public opinion subtly. Every article she wrote painted a picture of a world filled with lurking dangers and hidden threats. She implied that humanity needed strong leaders, protectors who could keep them safe from the unknown. Her words dripped with ominous hints that suggested that only those who could see through the shadows, people like her and Lucian, could save them. With each article, she sowed more doubt, more fear. People began to mistrust one another, turning against neighbors and friends. They started to look to the leaders for protection and guidance, unknowingly placing themselves in the hands of vampires who wished to control them. Through Elena's manipulative media presence, the vampires fostered an atmosphere of fear that made the populace even more malleable. Anyone who questioned the new policies or pointed out the strange events in town found themselves silenced, either through dismissal or a quiet disappearance. The resistance emerges. Months passed, and the once vibrant town had become a hollow shell, its people subdued and pale. But there was one among them who was not so easily swayed. A young reporter named Michael had been tracking strange events in the town. He was skeptical of the increasing security measures and the endless blood drives, and he noticed that prominent people kept disappearing. One night, Michael decided to investigate the mysterious warehouse where the blood from the drives was stored. As he crept into the cold, dark space, he was horrified to find rows upon rows of blood bags, each labeled with the names of local townsfolk. It was clear these weren't being used for medical purposes. Suddenly, he heard footsteps. Heart pounding, Michael hid behind a stack of crates, watching as Lucian entered, inspecting the bags. A cold, chilling realization settled over him. These were no ordinary philanthropists. These were monsters feeding on his community. He managed to slip away unseen and raced back to his apartment. There, he began documenting everything he'd discovered, determined to expose the truth. He reached out to a few trusted friends, urging them to stay vigilant and gather any evidence they could. The rising darkness, but Vargas and his lieutenants had been watching Michael as closely as he had been watching them. They knew he was a threat, someone who might unravel their carefully laid plans. That night, Elena visited him under the guise of a concerned friend. She played on his fears, trying to convince him that his mind was playing tricks on him, that he was simply seeing conspiracies where none existed. Her gaze was hypnotic, her words dripping with venomous charm. But Michael was resolute. He stood his ground, refusing to be swayed. Sensing his defiance, Elena's mask slipped, and her eyes darkened. In that moment, Michael saw the monster behind the beautiful facade, and he knew he was in grave danger. He fled, narrowly escaping into the night, with the knowledge that he could no longer stay in town. A final confrontation. As days turned to weeks, the town grew ever darker, its people weak and lifeless, like cattle waiting for slaughter. Meanwhile, Michael gathered a small group of rebels, friends who believed him and were willing to fight for their freedom. Armed with makeshift weapons and knowledge, they plotted to infiltrate Vargas's castle and put an end to the nightmare. They waited until the dead of night, slipping through the fog-blanketed forest toward the castle. Each step was perilous, each shadow felt alive with danger. As they neared the castle, Michael felt a chill crawl up his spine. He could feel eyes watching them, waiting. Inside, Vargas awaited them, his crimson eyes gleaming with amusement. He'd known about Michael's little rebellion and had allowed them to come, confident in his own power. But Michael was prepared, carrying vials of holy water and a silver crucifix that had been in his family for generations. When the battle began, it was brutal. Michael and his friends fought with every ounce of their strength, but the vampires were fast, ruthless, and unyielding. One by one, his friends fell, their lives extinguished by the creatures of the night. At last, it was just Michael and Vargas. The vampire lord loomed over him, his presence radiating an ancient, terrifying power. "You are brave, human," Vargas sneered, "but foolish. Did you really think you could stop me?" Michael, bloodied and exhausted, raised his crucifix defiantly. "I won't let you take this town, or humanity," he gasped. Vargas laughed, advancing with a predatory grace. But as he reached out, Michael threw the vial of holy water, dousing the vampire's face. Vargas screamed, his skin sizzling and bubbling. In that moment of weakness, Michael lunged, plunging the silver crucifix into Vargas's chest with every ounce of strength he had left. The room filled with a blood-curdling scream as Vargas disintegrated into dust. His followers, sensing their master's death, fled into the night, their hold over the town shattered. Dawn breaks. When the first rays of dawn broke over the mountains, Michael stumbled out of the castle, the weight of his fallen friends heavy on his heart. But he had won. The vampires had been driven back into the shadows, their grip over the town broken. As he walked back to the town square, the remaining townspeople gathered around him, their faces pale but filled with hope. He told them everything, about the vampires, the blood, and the horrors that had plagued their town. And though it would take time to heal, the people vowed never to forget the darkness that had nearly consumed them. But Michael knew this was only a temporary victory. He knew that, somewhere out there in the shadows, other vampires like Vargas were waiting, watching, and planning. And he vowed that, when they returned, he would be ready. Epilogue. Years later, in distant cities and small towns, whispers circulated about a group known as the Shadow Hunters, a network of those who remembered the events in that small, forgotten town. Led by Michael, they were a secret society dedicated to tracking and hunting vampires, determined to keep humanity safe from the dark forces that still lurked just beyond the light. And so, as the sun set over the mountains, casting long shadows over the land, humanity remained safe, for now. But Michael knew that, so long as darkness existed, the battle would never truly end.